Hello, we are back. We are doing our Holy, Be Holy for I Am Holy book club. And we are reading The Complete Visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich. And she is an awesome visionary. She has seen so many beautiful things, visions that she has had, and they have been approved by the church guides. And today we're going to talk about the most holy virgin. Genealogy, birth, and marriage of Saint Anne.
Can I just say
Yes.
that as we go through, sorry, this is echo. As we go through, this falls along with the key events of the Bible. The person who compiled her visions put them in the chronological order of the Bible. So I will be putting underneath where we are in the key events of the Bible of where this her visions, what part of the Bible it takes place in. You probably will be able to tell if you know something about the Bible, but I'm just doing it for people who are trying to learn their key events like me and to help us to understand the Bible as a whole. Okay.
The ancestors of Saint Anne were Essenians. These extraordinarily pious people were descended from those priests who, in the time of Moses and Aaron, carried the ark and who received precise rules in the days of Isaiah and Jeremiah. They were not numerous in the beginning. Later on, in Palestine, they lived in communities occupying a tract about 48 miles long and 36 wide. Sometime after, they migrated to the region of the Jordan, where they dwelt chiefly on Mount Horeb and on Mount Carmel. In early times, before Isaiah gathered them together, the Essenians lived scattered as pious, eccentric Jews. They
Ascetic.
neither ascetic Jews. They neither changed nor repaired their garments until they actually fell to pieces. They married but observed great continence in the married state. With mutual consent, husband and wife frequently lived apart in distant huts. They also ate apart, first the husband, and on his departure, the wife. Even in those early times, some of the forefathers of Anne and of other members of the Holy Family were found among them. From them sprang those that are called the children of the prophets. They dwelt in the desert and around Mount Horeb. There were many of them likewise in Egypt. For a long time, war drove them from Mount Horeb, but they were gathered together again by their superiors. The Maccabees belonged to this sect. They greatly revered Moses. They had a piece of his garment. He had given it to Aaron and through a German mile equivalent to 4½ English miles. The later it came into the possession of the Essenians. They preserved it as a sacred thing. And I had a vision in which I saw that 15 of the Essenians had perished in its defense. Their superiors knew of the mystery, the holy thing, in the Ark of the Covenant. The unmarried among the Essenians formed a special congregation like a religious order. They had to undergo a probation of long years before being admitted to it. And then they were received for a longer or a shorter time as the prophetical inspiration of superiors might dictate. The married Essenians who exercised strict vigilance over their children and household bore to the real Essenian community the same spiritual relationship that the Franciscan heretiaries due to the Franciscan order. In all affairs, they were guided by the counsel of their spiritual superior on Harab. The unmarried Essenians were unspeakably chaste and devout. They wore long white garments, which they kept scrupulously clean. They received children to educate. The aspirant to their rigid life had to be 14 years old. Postulants of advanced piety were kept only 1 year on probation, others 2 years. They lived in perfect chastity and carried on no kind of business. They exchanged their agricultural products for the various necessaries of life. If anyone of their number were so unfortunate as to sin grievously, he was excommunicated, which excommunication was followed by consequences such as attended St. Peter's malediction against Ananias. He died. The superior of the Essenians knew by divine inspiration whenever anyone had fallen into sin. I saw also some who lived only to do penance. One, for instance, stood in a sort of stiff coat with outstretched, inflexible sleeves, lined with prickles. Oh. They had caves on Mount Harab, which served as cells. Attached to them by wicker work was a large cave for general assembly. At the 11th hour, all met here for a meal. Each had before him a small loaf and cup. The superior went around and blessed the loaf of bread. The meal over, all returned to their own cells. In the large hall was an altar upon which lay blessed loaves. They were covered and intended for distribution to the poor. There were numbers of tame pigeons around which fed out of the hand. Oh, the Essenians used these doves for food, also for religious ceremonies. They uttered some words over them, and they let them fly away. I saw them also performing the same ceremony over lambs. They spoke some words over them and then let them run into the wilderness. I saw that they went 3 times every year to the temple of Jerusalem. They had among their priests whose special care was the preservation of the sacred vestments. They cleaned them and prepared new ones, to the purchase of which they had contributed. I saw these people engaging in agriculture, in cattle raising, and especially in gardening. That part of Mount Harab which lay around their cells was covered with gardens and fruit trees. I saw many of them engaged likewise in weaving and plaiting, and in embroidering and sacerdotal garments. I saw that they did not manufacture the silk themselves. It came in bundles for sale, and they exchanged their products for it. In Jerusalem, they had a special dwelling place, also a particular part of the temple assigned to them. They were objects of dislike to the other Jews. I saw them sending offerings to the temple for sacrifice, huge bunches of grapes that 2 men carried between them on a pole, and lambs. But these lambs were not slaughtered, they were allowed to run. I never saw them bringing offerings for slaughter. Before going up to the temple, they prepared themselves by prayer, rigid fasting, disciplines, and other penitential exercises. He who with unatoned sins ventured to the temple might fear sudden death, and indeed this happened to some. If on their way to the temple they met a person sick or helpless, they paused and went no further until they had in some manner assisted him. I saw them gathering herbs and preparing teas. They healed the sick by the imposition of hands or by stretching themselves upon them with extended arms. I saw them also exerting their healing power at a distance. If a sick person could not go himself to the Essenians, he sent to them another of his representatives. All that would have been done for the sick person himself, had he really been present, was done for his representative, and the sick man was cured at the same hour. The superior at time of Anne's grandparents was a prophet named Archus. He had visions in the cave of Elias on Horeb, which visions referred to the coming of the Messiah. Archos knew from what family the Messiah would come, and when he prophesied to Anne's grandparents concerning their posterity, he saw that the time was drawing near. He knew not exactly how far off it was, nor how it might still be retarded by sin, but he exhorted to penance and sacrifice. 10.
Anne's grandfather, an Essenian, was before his marriage called Solanus, but by his wife and in consideration of her dowry, he received the name Geresha or Sarziri. Anne's grandmother was of Mara in the desert. Her name was Moruni or Emoran. That is, she married Staulanus upon the advice of Archos, the prophet, who was the superior of the Essenians for about 90 years. He was a very holy man with whom counsel was always taken by those intending to enter upon the married state, that they might make a good choice. It seemed to me strange that this divinely enlightened superior always prophesied respecting the female descendants, and that the ancestors of Anne, as well as Anne herself, always had daughters. It was as if the religious education of the pure vessels that were to conceive the holy children, destined to be the precursors of the disciples of the apostles and of the Lord himself, devolved upon them. I saw Emmeron going to Archos before her marriage. She entered the hall on Horeb, passed thence into a side apartment, and conferred with the superior through a grating like that of a confessional. Then Archos went up a long flight of steps to the summit of the mountain, where was found the cave of the prophet Elias. The entrance was narrow, and a few steps led down into the cave, which was neatly hollowed out. The light fell through an opening in the vaulted roof. I saw by the wall a small stone altar, upon which was the rod of Aaron and the shining chalice as of one precious stone. In this chalice lay a portion of the Ark of the Covenant. The Essenians had come into possession of it at a time when the Ark had fallen into the hands of the enemy. The rod of Aaron stood in a little tree as in a box. The tree had yellowish leaves wreathed in spirals. I cannot say whether this little tree was really growing or whether it was artificial. It was, for instance, something like a root of Jesse. If the superior prayed concerning a marriage, he took the rod of Aaron into his hand. If the union in question would contribute to Mary's lineage, the rod put forth a bud from which sprang one or more blossoms bearing the sign of the choice. The forefathers of Anne were legitimate descendants of this lineage, and their chosen daughters had been by such signs designated. New blossoms burst forth whenever a chosen daughter was to enter the married state. The little tree with its spiral leaves was like a genealogical table, like the root of Jesse, and by it could be seen how far the advent of Mary was distant. There were on the altar also some small bunches of herbs in pots. Their flourishing or withering denoted something. I saw all around on the walls grated compartments wherein there were preserved ancient holy bones, very beautifully encased in silk and wool. There were the bones of prophets and holy Israelites who had lived upon the mountain and in its vicinity. I saw such bones in the cells or caves of the Assyrians. They used to place lighted lamps and flowers before them, and there offered prayers. When Archos prayed in this cave, he was vested precisely like the high priest in the temple. His clothing consisted of about 8 pieces. First, he placed upon his breast a kind of broad scapular, such as Moses used to wear next to his person. It had an opening in the middle for the neck and fell in equal length before and behind. Over this he wore a white alb of twisted silk bounded by a cincture that fastened also the wide stole, which crossing on the breast reached down to the knee. Over the alb was a kind of chasuble of white silk. It reached to the ground behind, and it had 2 little bells at the lower edge. Around the neck was a standing collar buttoned in front. The beard was parted over this collar. Last of all came a small shining mantle of white untwisted silk. It was fastened in front by 3 stone clasps, upon which something was engraved. From either soldier toward the breast ran a row of 6 precious stones, upon which also signs were engraved. On the back of it and in the center was a shield upon which were inscribed some letters. This mantle was adorned with fringes, tassels, and artificial fruit. On one arm he wore a short mantle, and the headdress was of white silk rolled in puffs, one above the other, and ending in a silken tuft. Over the forehead was a plate of gold set with precious stones. Archos prayed prostrate on the earth before the altar. I saw that he had a vision of a rose tree with 3 branches springing from Emmerich. On each branch was a rose, and that of the second was marked with a letter. He saw also an angel writing letters on the wall. In consequence of this vision, Archos told Emmerich that he should marry her 6th suitor, that she should bring forth a chosen child who would bear a sign and who would be a vessel of the approaching promise. The 6th suitor was Stolenus. The married pair did not dwell long in Mara. They moved to Ephron. Again, I saw their daughters, Emmerich and Ismeria. Consulting with Archos, he commanded them to embrace the married state, for they were also cooperating vessels of the promise. The elder one, Emmerich, married a Levite named Aphras and became the mother of Elizabeth, who gave birth to John the Baptist. A third daughter was named Enu. Ismeria was the second daughter of Stolanus and Emron. Oh, I didn't know they had a second daughter. She had at her birth the mark that Anchos, in his version of Emron, had seen on the rose of the second branch. Ismeria married Eliad of the tribes of Levi. They were wealthy, as I judged from their great household. They owned many herds, but they kept nothing for themselves. They gave all to the poor. They dwelt in Sepphoris, 4 leagues from Nazareth, where they possessed property. They had property also in the valley of Zabulun, whither they used to remove in the warm season. After Ismariah's death, Eliud took up his abode there permanently. Joachim's father and his family had likewise settled in the same valley. The imminent chastity and mortification of Stellanus and Amorium had descended to Ismariah and Eliud. Ismariah's first daughter was called Sobi. She married Solomon and became the mother of Mary Salam, who married Zebedee and gave birth to the future apostles. Oh, wow. James the Greater and John, when at Sobi's birth the sign of the promise was not found on her, her parents were greatly troubled. They journeyed to the prophet on Horeb. He exhorted them to prayer and sacrifice and promised them consolation. For about 18 years, they were without children, and then Anne was born. Both father and mother had the same vision one night upon their couch. Ismariah saw an angel near her writing on the wall. On awakening, she told her husband, who also had had the same vision, and both still saw the written character on the wall. It was the letter M. At her birth, Anne brought with her into the world the same sign upon the region of the stomach. Anne was especially dear to her parents. I saw her as a child. She was not strikingly beautiful, though prettier than some others. Her beauty was not to be compared with Mary's, but she was extraordinarily pious, childlike, and innocent. She was the same at every age as I have seen as a maiden, as a mother, and as a little old grandmother. Whenever I happened to see a very childlike old peasant woman, I always thought she is like Anne. When in her 5th year, Anne was taken to the temple as Mary was later. There she remained 12 years, returning home in her 17th year. Meantime, her mother had a third daughter, whom she named Maraha, and Anne found also in the paternal house a little son of her eldest child, Sobi, who was called Elidud. Maraha afterward inherited the paternal property of Sepphoris and became the mother of the subsequent disciples, Aristaria and Kocharia. The young Eliud was afterward the second husband of Moroni of Naam. 1 year later, Ismariah fell sick and died. She called her household around her deathbed, gave them at her parting advice, and appointed Anne as their future mistress. Then they spoke alone with Anne, saying that she must marry, for that she was a vessel of the promise. About 18 months after Anne, then in her 19th year, married Heli or Joachim. This she did in obedience to the spiritual direction of the prophet. On account of the approach of the Savior's advent, she married Joachim of the house of David. For Mary was to belong to the house of David. Otherwise, she would have had to choose her spouse from among the Levites of the tribe of Aaron, as all of her race had done. She had had many suitors, and at the time of the prophetess's decision, she was not yet acquainted with Joachim. She chose him only upon supernatural direction. Joachim was poor and a relative of Saint Joseph. Joseph's grandfather, Mathan, had descended from David through Solomon. He had 2 sons, Joseph and Jacob. The latter was Joseph's father. When Mathan died, his widow married a second husband named Levi, descendant of David through Nathan. The fruit of this marriage was Mathat, the father of Heli or Joachim. Joachim was a short, broad, spare man. Saint Joseph, even in his old age, was very handsome compared with him. However, in disposition and morals, Joachim was a superior man. Like Anne, he had something very distinguished about him. Both were true Israelites, but there was something in them that they themselves knew not, a yearning, a wonderful earnestness. I have rarely seen either of them laugh. Although in the early part of their married life they were not particularly grave, both possessed a calm, uniform disposition, even in early youth. They were something like sedate old people. They were married in a small town that possessed only one obscure school, and only one priest presided at the ceremony. Courtship in these days was carried on very simply. The lovers were very reserved. They consulted each other on the subject and regarded their marriage merely as something inevitable. If the young girl said yes, her parents were satisfied. If no, and she could give good reasons for her refusal, they looked upon the affair as ended. First, the matter was settled before the parents, and then the promises were made before the priest in the synagogue. The priest prayed in the sanctuary before the rolls of the law. The parents in their accustomed place, while the young couple in an adjoining apartment deliberated in private over their intention and contract. When they had taken their determination, they declared it to their parents. Excuse me. The latter again conferred with the priest, who now went to meet the couple outside the sanctuary. The nuptial ceremony was celebrated the next day. Joachim and Anne lived with Eliud, Anne's father. There reigned throughout his household the severe usages and disciplines of the Assyrians. The house lay in the environs of Sepphoris. It formed one group of houses, of which it was the largest. Here Joachim and Anne dwelt 7 years. Jeanette, sorry, I'm losing my breath.
Oh, it's okay. I just got to find where you're at.
It says Anne's parents were in good.
Anne's parents were in good circumstances. They had numerous herds and a house handsomely furnished with beautiful carpets, table furniture, etc. The servants, men and women, were many. I never saw them engaged in agriculture, but herding cattle on the pasture grounds. Esmeria and Elud were pious, devout, charitable, and just. They frequently divided their herds and other possessions into 3 parts, one part for the temple, whither they drove it themselves and where it was received by the servants of the temple. A second part they gave to the poor or to their needy relatives, some of whom were generally present to receive it. And the third part they reserved for their own use. They lived very frugal and gave to all that asked help. When I saw all this, even in then I get lost when you move it. That's why I do my book.
Right here, childhood, right here.
Childhood, I thought giving lasts long. He who gives gets back double, for I perceived that the third part again rapidly increased. It was soon so large that it could be again divided into 3 parts as before. They had many relatives who upon all solemn occasions assembled at their house, but I never even on those occasions saw much feasting. Food was indeed distributed among the poor, but grand entertainments I never saw. At these assemblies, the guests generally reclined in circles on the ground and conversed of God with earnest expectancy. It frequently happened that some of these relatives were bad people. They looked angry and displeased with Eliud and Isemariah, full of heavenly longing, glanced upward as they spoke of God. But to these evil-minded people, the holy couple were ever kind. They never omitted to invite them to their reunions, and they gave twice as much to them as to others. I used to see that they were bitter feelings, impatiently coveted by what Eliud and Ismaria gave them with so much goodwill. It was no uncommon thing for the holy couple to give sheep, sometimes one, sometimes more, to the poor belonging to them. Here in her father's house, Anne gave birth to her first daughter, who was called Mary. I saw her full of joy over her newborn babe. It was a lovely child. I saw it growing stout and strong. It was gentle and pious, and the parents loved it. But yet there was something about the child that I could not understand, something that indicated that it was not the one looking forward to by the parents as the fruit of their union. There was always a shade of trouble and anxiety about them, as if they had offended God. Therefore, they did penance, lived in continuance, and multiplied their good works. I often saw them going apart to pray. They had lived in this way with their father Eliud 7 years, which I could guess by the age of their first child. When they resolved to withdraw from the paternal house, their design was to live in privacy, to begin their married life anew, and by performing actions pleasing to God, to draw down his benediction upon their union. I saw them take this resolution in the paternal home, and I also saw Eliud setting aside a portion of his riches for them. The herds were divided, oxen, asses, and sheep set apart for the new household. The animals named were much larger than those of our country. On the asses and oxen were packed all kinds of movable furniture and clothing. The good people were as skillful in packing as were the animals ready to receive and carry away their loads. We do not pack our goods so skillfully on our wagons as these people could upon their beasts. They had beautiful vessels, all more highly ornamented than those of the present day. Beautiful, fragile, curiously shaped pitchers, upon which were all kinds of ornamentation, like carvings, were stuffed with moss, enveloped in wrapping, fastened to the ends of a strap, and hung over the back of the animal, upon which were laid bundles of colored covers and garments. Some of the covers were embroidered in gold and were costly. Father Eliud gave the departing couple a small but heavy lump of something in a bag. It was like a lump of gold, a precious metal. When all was ready, the servant men and maids formed in procession and drove the herds of beasts off burden before them toward what? The herds of beasts of burden before them toward the new dwelling, about 5 or 6 leagues distant. The house stood upon a hill between the vale of Nazareth and the valley of Zabalun. A turpentine walk led to it. In front of it, on the bare, stony foundation, was a courtyard surrounded by a low stone wall, upon or behind which grew a hedge. On one side of this courtyard were sheds for the cattle. The door of the house, which was tolerably large, was in the center of the building and hung upon hinges. Through it one entered a kind of enter room, which extended the whole breadth of the house. Right and left of the hall were small apartments cut off by lightly woven partitions or screens that could be removed at pleasure. It was in this hall that the principal meals were laid on feasts, as, for instance, when Mary was taken to the temple. Opposite the entrance, a light wicker door led from the hall into passage, upon either side of which were four apartments, lying right and left. They were separated by movable wicker partitions, the upper part ending in grating. These partitions were so placed as to form a rounded, or rather a kind of triangular shape in the middle of those central side. Just opposite the door was the fireplace behind the two oblique sides, right and left, were other chambers. In the center of this kitchen, there hung from the ceiling a many branded lamp. Around the house were fields and orchards. When Joachim and Anne entered their new abode, they found everything in order, owing to the diligence of the domestics who had preceded them. They had unpacked all things as nicely and carefully as they had packed them, and everything was in its place. And servants were so handy, they did everything quietly and intelligently. They were not like the servants of our day, who have to be told every single thing. And now the holy couple began here a new married life. They made a sacrifice to God of all the preceding years and began again as if they had only just now been united. Their only aim was by the life pleasing to God to attract upon themselves that blessing for which alone they sighed. I saw them both going to and fro among their herds. They divided them into three parts and drove the best to the temple. The poor received the second part, and the worst was retained for themselves. They acted in the same manner with all that belonged to them. Wow.
Isn't it funny? We were just doing St. Joseph on the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And then here is this reading. Isn't that interesting? So
Wow,
we
I
were,
love it because it brought to my eyes. I can see now Mary's parents and how they lived and where they came from. I love it. I love it, love it, love it.
yeah, we were on day 28 of the St. Joseph consecration. We happened to be almost at the end. And it's funny how some of these readings are coinciding with so much of that.
The Holy Spirit.
Yeah, so this was really interesting. I don't have a whole lot to say but I did recognize some of the names, which was fun and interesting. And the description of the clothes made me think we need to get back to our doll making. After
Oh
we're done
yeah.
this St. Joseph.
Yes, definitely.
Um, and I love the description of the layers of the costumes and twisted silk and all these things. I really enjoyed that. I did not like how they kept changing his name because I couldn't keep track of him. Um,
Yeah,
but
I had a problem with the names also,
yeah, the pronunciation too. Yeah.
but
And I like how they went and would say this person ended up having this child. So it was interesting that all these people were getting to look back, not just Mary's, but we're getting to look back at John the Baptist's
yeah.
parents, grandparents.
And
It's
it's
like,
awesome how we know that also the line of David.
yeah, and it's like that movie, that show that Joe watches that I think you told me how it has generations, you see
Oh,
it has three
yeah.
storylines at the same time,
Yes.
1920 and 19 whatever. And so it
Yes.
has the grandparents as they're doing it. So it kind of gives me that feel.
Yeah, I'm watching 1883 now, and it started with Yellowstone. Then um it went to some other, I forgot the number, but it was another year that I finished. It was so good. It was better than Yellowstone, actually. And now I'm doing the way before, which is the cowboy era, which is 1883, which is very interesting. But it's all
Yeah.
on Paramount Plus, so you have to own Paramount Plus to get that.
I don't know what he has, but he must have that. But I just thought it was interesting because I think it comes with Amazon Prime though, because I think that's what
I
he
don't
said.
know.
I
I
could be
didn't
wrong.
I didn't really like in the one that I just finished watching, 1923, I think it's called 1923. Um, I didn't like how they treated the Indians. Oh my gosh. That's why in
Yeah,
Yellowstone you
but
see,
it's written by liberals.
yes,
I
and
don't know.
they degrade, I mean, the sisters and the priests and how they treated those Indians. It can't be true. I don't believe it's true. So I have to fast forward those parts. I can't watch them. I have to fast forward.
Yeah,
But everything else
liberals
is good.
liberals tend to do
Everything
that.
else is good. I just have to
Yeah.
fast forward those parts.
Now, in this reading today, did you notice this part where it says this was at the letter M at her birth and brought with her into the world the same sign upon the region of the stomach. So it sounds like
She was
um a
marked.
birthmark. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe a little M.
yeah. And you know the M that we put, I forget what it's called. Um,
M for Mary. No,
yeah, but
I don't know.
there
I'm just guessing.
no, but there's a thing that we do, and I can't remember the I now I can't get this highlight off. Um, but yeah, so I thought that was interesting here.
Yeah.
So and then they said that she was not as beautiful as Mary. I thought that was also interesting. So Mary, she was not strikingly beautiful, and Mary was.
Mary was very beautiful.
Yeah, so I just really thought that was really interesting. It gave us a little insight. And then they talked about the deathbed, and in our reading on day 28, we're talking about the comfort of the afflicted and the pious and the what was it, something on the death, the dying, pious union of Saint Joseph, and something on the dying, so comforting of the dying. So I thought,
Afflicted, comfort of the
yeah,
afflicted.
yeah, comfort the afflicted, but it also was about the dying, remember?
Yeah.
So it was interesting that they brought up both of those issues here, and the corporal works of mercy they brought up. So I really thought that was really significant that we were just studying that. And that's what all of Anne's um grandparents were doing, as well as John the Baptist grandparents and parents. I just thought that was so interesting how we're reading that at the time.
Yes.
I don't believe in accidents.
It's awesome. No, I don't either. I think it's the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. So and then the fact that Anne gave birth to Mary at her father's house,
Yeah.
and seeing Mary as a baby, that was kind of fun to see Mary as a baby. And then
Yeah.
I was a little disturbed that there was always a shade of trouble and anxiety about them
I
as they.
think it was because she was living in her father's house because she felt she had to move. She felt something was troubling her. She needed to get out of that house. She needed to go on her own. And that's when she moved. And now she was fine. Now they're starting a new life and they kept doing what they normally do, the
Well,
tithing and all that.
it said here that because they were anxiety, they as if they offended God, Therefore, they did penance, lived in continence, and multiplied their good works. I often saw them going apart to pray. I think that they knew that Mary was someone special. It
Yeah.
wasn't just that Anne was someone special and Mary was someone special. They they knew
Yeah.
that they felt they had to be sinless the way Mary was automatically. She was born of original sin and they were living with the Ark of the Covenant even though she was a child. So I feel like it had to do with that. When we are uncomfortable in our sins, we, like I
Yeah.
was saying in our Saint Joseph, a lot of times when someone is dying, if they lived a very sinful life, they are disordered and uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
I think, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that they
Oh,
lived,
no, no. I mean, we can
yeah,
only guess. We can
yeah.
only,
I'm not
because we
saying
don't
that they
know.
lived a very sinful life, but back then, every tiny sin was they really looked at, like for us, we have gotten like the frog in the boiling water. We've been okay with sin. So I think every tiny thing they
But she wasn't that poor because she had people helping her. She had,
right.
it said
But
that she had people helping her.
but you have to understand, back then everybody was poor, so people could be paid very little. Like right now in Nicaragua, you can get people that are just average people have maids and stuff because they're so poor there. They don't have social programs like we have.
Yeah.
So and then it comes to where they had lived in this way with their father, like you said, which I could guess by the age of their first child, they resolved to withdraw from the paternal house. Whoops. Their design was to live in privacy. So they began their married life anew by performing actions pleasing to God. So maybe they were feeling sinful because they were feeling put upon with living in someone else's house. And back then, if you did anything to dishonor your parents, that was a big sin. So I think you're right that when they left the parents' house, they were more comfort. They were more, they felt less sinful because they weren't feeling uncomfortable from their parents. Because in a new marriage, to be living, imagine you and Greg living with his parents, you
Yeah.
know,
And
it
then
would,
that's the house of Loretto that we read about in
yeah.
St.
And
Joseph.
yeah, and think of it this way, that in-laws, I stay away from the in-laws as much as I can because we're very different and our kids come together and I don't, you know, my my son and his wife have, they have a like they spent Easter with her dad this year because the grandmom's birthday, grandmom's like in her 90s, and it just happened to fall on her birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was interesting. And so I think that in-laws can make the other person uncomfortable, so I think you're right about that. So it was really interesting, and it was interesting seeing how they live and how the house, and like you said, the one was the Loretta house. So just bringing all these together was just, it was just really cool. And like you said about the servants, I didn't think of Anne's servants as were so handy. They did everything
Yeah,
quietly,
they did everything
intelligently.
for her.
Yeah, they were not like the servants of our day. Well, we don't have servants
Oh,
in our
no.
day. But
But
in
then they were so nice.
well,
They were
the
such
thing,
awesome people that, I mean, anybody would like to live with them and serve them for free, even.
the thing is they didn't know who they were, but they had maybe a feeling about it. But see, when she wrote this, remember, she's writing her visions. This is in the 1800s. She had servants. So when she says they were not like the servants of our day, she means in her day, not in our day. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought that was interesting. But anyway, it's a nice short reading today, so I hope you all enjoyed it. And
Yeah.
we will be back tomorrow.
Yeah, God willing, we will be back tomorrow.
Yeah, enjoy your tea party with your
Yes,
little
I'm ready. I
thing.
just need my hat. I need my big hat, and then I'll be
Yeah,
all
your
ready.
little.
I got my pearls.
Oh, so what? So tell us about this tea party. Why are you doing this tea party?
Well, it's at a person's house every year. We have a tea party. It's my Bible study. I do several. I belong to several Bible studies. These are the ladies called Threads.
Oh, is this
Threads
thread?
Bible study. And you've
Oh,
been to a few, and it's
yeah,
once a year. It was at my house several years back, but now it's somebody else's house. And they serve tea, and we all bring a dish, and
nice.
we do the Bible study there, dressed up in our tea attire.
Oh, is it a once a year thing and is
Yes.
at the end of the year for a little while? Do you take a break in between?
Um, it's normally around this time, which is around
Easter?
Mother's Day,
Oh, Mother's Day.
normally, because it kind of falls in with the tea theme and
Yeah.
spring. It's spring tea, they call it.
Oh, okay.
Spring
Cute.
tea, spring
That's
tea
cute.
party.
And they
So
have
yeah,
these, they have
and
threads
these,
all over the country, right?
I don't know. I don't think so. This group
Well,
of
if you want to
ladies,
find out about threads and starting a threads in your neighborhood,
these
send
ladies
Jeanette.
have been doing it 20 years.
Yeah, so send Jeanette an email or leave her a message and she'll tell you what she knows because they have a little format that they follow.
Yeah, it's really cool. We just study the readings for the Sunday, for that following Sunday. So we'll read the readings for this Sunday coming up, which is the Divine Mercy Sunday. We just do the readings and then we talk about them and we share with everybody what we get, the insights and everything. And then we share our prayers and what we're praying for and, that kind of thing. But it's
And
really
they
nice.
have
It's a nice
special
group of ladies.
prayers that they start with and they end with. Remember, I was there, it was Valentine's Day, and
Yeah.
they had it at a Panera Bread, and they put
Yeah.
little napkins like heart napkins and stuff. They set a
Yeah.
little table. Then we
Yeah.
had a little private room, and Panera had a little private room, a
Well,
sunroom
actually, we meet once a week, Thursdays at 10. That's
at
why today
Panera.
at 10 is the thing. At Panera, we pick, the Panera by church,
Uh-huh.
by Annunciation there, and we meet there at 10 a.m. So anybody that wants to come are welcome. It's a nice
Hmm.
big table. It's a bunch of us girls, and we just do the readings. You can bring whatever little magazine. I have
And you could start one in your neighborhood.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
Live far.
that's it, guys. Enjoy.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.